But that's not what happened. Lily's doctor peeled off all the patches and explained that he could only see a few mild allergic reactions, but nothing that could cause a reaction this bad all over her body. Lily couldn't understand. Her symptoms had matched an extreme allergic reaction perfectly, especially to latex or the at-home nail gel. She was so sure she was on the right track, and now she just felt defeated. Lily drove home in a stupor. She felt like her life was now this living hell. She thought back to the previous summer, mad at herself for not appreciating how good her life used to be. She'd give anything to go back to the day of her best friend's wedding and just look like her old self again. She ran her tongue over the veneers she'd gotten for the wedding. Her smile was the only part of her physical appearance that she liked now, but she would give it up in a second to get her old skin back. But just then, a thought hit her like a lightning bolt, and she actually pulled her car over so quickly that the tires screeched. Once she came to a stop, she immediately began rifling through her purse for her phone, and as her heart raced, she thought to herself she'd been going to the wrong doctor. That was the issue, and now she desperately needed to make an appointment with the right one. 2 days later, Lily sat in her dentist chair. She told him that in her quest to look perfect for her friend's wedding, she suspected that she had accidentally set herself up for months of misery. She was just sure she had discovered the cause of her extreme rash. When the dentist looked skeptical, Lily told him about the article she found online about extreme allergies. And suddenly, the dentist understood too. Lily had a strong suspicion that her problems had all been caused by the gels in her at-home nail kit. But it was more complicated than that. In fact, the online article Lily read talked about the way nail gels can make people dangerously allergic to other everyday things. That's because the acrylic-based plastic in the gel can seep into someone's nail bed and make them allergic to anything else that contains acrylic. In Lily's case, that would be the veneers she had applied to her teeth to look beautiful for the wedding. The veneers were loaded with acrylic-based plastic, and her body had a very powerful reaction to it. Essentially, Lily had poison glued to her front teeth for the last 6 months, which triggered a constant, severe allergic reaction. Ultimately, the dentist ground the veneers off of Lily's teeth in April of 2023, and slowly but surely, the rash became less painful. By the summer of 2023, Lily's skin was back to normal, and she felt like herself again. There's really no way to know for sure whether the at-home gel manicure kit had triggered her allergy, but either way, Lily has steered clear of them ever since.
I've been paying into Social Security and Medicare with every paycheck. But Bob Bresnahan wants to join extremists in Congress trying to cut our Social Security and Medicare benefits. Bob Bresnahan isn't looking out for folks like us.
Society fears those who are different, but not me.
Am I crazy?
What you're feeling is very real. Too many doctors treat symptoms, not people. I don't think this man is in a coma. He's in there. The key is to connect. If you can hear me, look up. Okay.
Brilliant Minds, tonight on NBC and Peacock.
Here is our second and final story called No Warning. On the morning of August 15th, 2020, 16-year-old Rohan Gadhania stood in his kitchen mixing up a protein shake. He was trying to put on some muscle before school started in a few weeks. Rohan took a sip and grimaced. The shake was thick and chalky, which he just was not expecting because he did not often drink protein shakes. But Rohan was never one to back down from a challenge, so he adjusted his glasses and steeled himself, then gulped the whole shake down. When he was done, he slammed the glass down on the counter in triumph. He told himself he was going to learn to like those shakes because he was going to get jacked. Rohan put the dirty glass in the dishwasher, then bounded up the stairs to his bedroom on the second floor, already feeling stronger. In truth, he was a very skinny kid, especially for his age. And even though Rohan knew he had a lot going for him, good grades, a bright future, a very winning personality, he really wanted big muscles, or at least to weigh more than a 12-year-old. Rohan opened the door to his bedroom and made a beeline for his piano keyboard. Rohan was a very accomplished musician and loved practicing just about every day. But this morning, he stopped himself and instead turned toward the Nintendo Wii game system hooked up to the television on top of his dresser. He grabbed the Wii remote and began browsing through Wii Fit games until he came to strength training. Rohan thought that if he started right now and kept on sucking down those protein shakes, maybe he really could build some actual muscle by the time classes resumed. At lunchtime, Rohan's father, Hitendra, made sandwiches for the two of them and then called Rohan to the kitchen table. But while Hitendra wolfed his meal down in about 4 bites, he noticed that his son barely touched his food. Rohan told him his stomach hurt, and Hitendra just nodded, understanding. He told his son it was fine if he didn't want to finish his lunch, and encouraged Rohan to go lie down and take a nap. Hopefully that would settle his stomach. Rohan smiled at his father and then left the kitchen. Once the boy was gone, Hitendra picked up Rohan's plate and began to tidy up. But then he heard the distinct sound of dry heaving coming from the upstairs bathroom. Hitendra dropped the plates into the sink and hurried upstairs to check on Rohan, who he found kneeling over the toilet. Rohan retched repeatedly as his father rubbed his back reassuringly. Then Hitendra suggested Rohan stay in bed for the rest of the day. It seemed like he must have picked up some kind of stomach bug. Once Rohan was in his bed with a waste can nearby just in case, Hitendra went back downstairs and found the protein powder he'd gotten for Rohan. It was the only unusual thing Rohan had eaten over the past couple of days, and Hitendra wondered if it had gone bad or had some strange ingredients in it. Hitendra scanned the label, and he saw the expiration date was not for a while, and none of the ingredients stood out to him as unusual or alarming, so he shrugged and put the protein powder back where it went in the cupboard, convinced his son would feel better by morning. But when Hitendra went to check on Rohan the next morning, the boy was as white as a sheet. Rohan admitted he'd vomited a few times overnight, and that he felt even worse than the day before. The boy propped himself up in bed, squinting. Hitendra thought his son might be looking for his glasses, so Hitendra told Rohan they were on the nightstand. Rohan nodded slowly, but then he started looking around the room as if he didn't know where to find his own nightstand. Hitendra frowned and just pointed at the nightstand, and Rohan's face suddenly lit up as though he was pleasantly surprised to even find a table there. Now, Hitendra couldn't help but feel more concern for his son. He wondered if Rohan was so dehydrated that he was confused. So he helped Rohan downstairs and sat him at the kitchen table while he went to grab a bottle of the sports drink they always kept in the pantry. But when Hitendra returned to the kitchen carrying his son's drink, his son suddenly seemed even stranger. Rohan glared at his father with utter contempt. When Hitendra asked if everything was okay, Rohan snapped that his father should mind his own business. Then Rohan got up so aggressively that the table shook. Then Rohan just stood there staring icily at his father. This was very unlike Rohan, and so Hitendra knew something had to be deeply wrong. Rohan was so gentle normally, but now he was erratic and aggressive and confused. Hitendra knew his son needed to see a doctor, but something told him it was just not safe to try to take Rohan to the hospital by himself right now, like not in this state. Something was terribly wrong. So to play it very safe, Hitendra just called an ambulance. A few hours later, Rohan's mother, Pushpa, arrived at West Middlesex Hospital, where the paramedics had taken her son. She kept telling herself that Rohan would be just fine, but Pushpa still felt incredibly anxious as she entered the hospital lobby. Her husband, Hitendra, met her in the hallway outside of Rohan's room and explained that Rohan had become increasingly agitated on his way to the hospital, and he kept trying to get up and move around the ambulance on the way, and Hitendra actually had to physically restrain him on the stretcher to keep him from jumping out the back doors. Pushpa just blinked in surprise at this incredibly strange turn of events. Rohan was just not the type of boy to fly into a rage, let alone leap out of a moving vehicle, and so fear began creeping into Pushpa's mind, much the way it had already creeped into Hitendra's mind. And so Pushpa followed Hitendra into Rohan's hospital room, hoping to find Rohan back to himself and feeling better, but instead, Rohan was sitting up in bed, hunched over a kidney-shaped bowl and vomiting. Pushpa felt instant sympathy for her son as she watched him throw up. That wasn't the worst of it. There were tubes hooked up to Rohan's arms and wires patched to his chest, leading to all sorts of whirring and beeping machines. Whatever was wrong with Rohan was clearly more serious than just the flu or some other minor ailment. Pushpa looked back at Hitendra, whose eyes were full of concern. Hitendra explained that Rohan had been deteriorating ever since they arrived at the hospital, and the doctors still had no idea what was making Rohan sick. Rohan was complaining of intense abdominal pain and kept forgetting where he was or how he'd even gotten there. Suddenly, the knot in Pushpa's chest tightened and her breathing quickened as she grappled with what Hitendra was saying. And so, kind of panicking, she just stepped out into the hallway and let out a scream of absolute despair. Her son was falling apart before her eyes, and there wasn't anything she could do. She felt so hopeless. Pushpa bent over and braced her hands on her knees, sucking in long breaths of air. When she finally felt like she had collected herself, she went back into the hospital room and planted a kiss on Rohan's forehead. She told her son everything was going to be fine, even though inside she didn't know that. Then she stood next to Hitendra, gripping his hand tightly.
Don't fuck with me.
Food prices are just too high. Kamala Harris's plan will bring costs down. Donald Trump, he'd impose what is effectively a national sales tax. A Trump tax that'll cost a typical family $3,900 a year. We need a president who fights for us.
Fire TV has so many great recommendations.
Yeah, serves up the best options from all my apps in one place. It's like it knows what I want to watch before I do.
The orangutans have escaped the zoo. They're everywhere!
Picture quality is amazing. So lifelike.
Yeah, you can search by genre, movie, actor.
Huh, that's convenient.
Alexa, show me the latest hit movies.
Sweet.
Get into more of what you're into with Fire TV.
Over the next few hours,
Damn it.
Pushpa and Hitendra paced the hospital room as their son alternated between moments of confusion and extreme agitation. All the while, doctors and nurses came in and out, explaining all the tests and treatments they were doing to try to figure out what was wrong. The doctor said that they suspected that Rohan was suffering from some kind of inflammation around the spinal column and brain, and so they started him on medication right away for the two most likely conditions, which were meningitis and encephalopathy. For a little while, Rohan did seem to get better with the medication, but just before midnight, he started to get restless and agitated again, and he began trying to jump out of the bed, which would have torn out all the wires and IV lines. And so Hitendra did his best to hold the teenager down, while Pushpa repeatedly pressed the call button for help. A moment later, two nurses were in Rohan's room, attaching restraints to Rohan's wrists so that he couldn't get out of bed.
73.
The doctor said that Rohan was getting too unstable to remain in a regular hospital room, and he directed the nurses to move him to the intensive care unit. Pushpa was shocked. She knew Rohan was sick, but she still couldn't believe his condition had gotten this bad, and so she had to fight to hold in another scream. The nurse said that Rohan would be
73.
sedated once he got
Best game
upstairs,
yet.
and he would likely be asleep for hours. She urged Pushpa and Hitendra